My name is Adrian Simmons. I'm the Chief Creative Designer here at ElementsCPA. And I want to take a few minutes right now to share with you what small business owners need to know about the newly released Corporate Transparency Act. So let me share my screen here. And we'll just sort of go through an overview of the key points to be aware of. So my goals with you this morning, one, you're familiar with the gist of the law that triggered this. A lot of times it's helpful to know that context in terms of how to interpret what it's asking you to do. Number two, just to give you the overview of how to complete your own registration so you can do that comfortably if it's something you want to do. Three, you're aware of situations that trigger required updates to this new federal database. And four, I'm going to throw in a couple smart tips and helpful resources you can refer to related to the Corporate Transparency Act. So let's go ahead and jump right in to number one, the gist of the new law. So just setting the background for a moment, the Corporate Transparency Act was signed into law back in January of 2021. And so it's had a period of comments and revisions and regulations. And the driver was that U.S. law enforcement agencies, individuals weren't able to adequately track international global money flows, whether it be money laundering, whether it be states who have an adverse intent with regards to the United States, other countries that is. So they needed some increased transparency behind as monies, assets, et cetera, were moving between different business entities. And a lot of times when they got to the small businesses, they had no idea who was behind it. So the intent was to create this new federal database for those entities to disclose who owned them, who influenced them, so that it can be clear when there was nefarious purposes at play. So after those years of open comments and drafts, it officially launched January 1, 2024, so this year. Bottom line, for most typical small businesses, it's actually not a huge issue. It's not a huge complexity. It'll be pretty simple and straightforward, but there's a few basics you need to know. There's going to be a small segment of the small businesses where they'll have some additional complications, and you do definitely want to get additional counsel and assistance with it. So, but it's important because failure to comply with this new law can result in up to 2 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. I don't know about you, but myself, and I don't think most small business owners aren't really interested in having that type of result. So definitely something that needs your attention. Be sure that you're covered. Again, not necessarily complex, but needs to be done. So let's go to the next second step, filing your initial registration. So again, that initial registration is just to sort of get your business information into this new federal database. So a couple tips here, and then I'll show you what that looks like in practice. The initial registration is mostly name and address and identifying document. Again, nothing rocket science here, but you should have that at hand. So I say here, number one, have your identifying documents at hand. So a very common scenario for small business owner, they are the 100% owner of their business. It's just them. So basically you need to know your information, and you need to have a driver's license or a US passport also works, but a qualifying identifying document, because you're going to need to take a picture of it and upload it to the website when you complete this process. So given that you have that list of owners, you have this identifying documents, you're going to go to the FinCEN BOI website. All right, so a couple acronyms in there. The first one is FinCEN, Financial Crimes and Enforcement Network. And the second is BOI, or Beneficial Ownership Information. Let me just show you what that looks like. This is the website, an official website of the US government. It's under the US Department of Treasury. This division is called the Financial Crimes and Enforcement Network. It's been around for many years. Some folks may have come into contact with it if they had to disclose the existence of bank accounts overseas. So it's not a new agency, but this is a new sort of responsibility they're being tasked with, this beneficial ownership information. So a little bit of a mouthful. again, in most cases, that's going to be simply who owns the business. I'm going to go into that a little bit further in a moment, but you're going to have that document. So you're going to go to that website. A tip I'm going to provide you here is I recommend you as a business owner create a FinCEN ID. All right. So what a FinCEN ID means is instead of every business you may be an owner in having to separately list your name and address and a copy of your driver's license, prior to actually the business going through the registration process, you as an individual can create your own ID profile within the database. And therefore, anywhere your name or address may appear for businesses you own or are part owners of, they can simply list your ID instead of having to go through all the extra steps of name and address. One of the reasons I recommend this is we're going to go over the fact how you have to update this database. You have any changes. Well, if you are listed in 3 different businesses, now you've got to update it in 3 different places. Where if you just updated your profile, it will then by effect update wherever your name appears. So first tip is I recommend as an individual that you create a FinCEN ID for yourself. Once that's done, then you're going to go and file the report for the business. And in there, it's going to ask what's your business name, what's your business's address, who are the owners, what are their names, what are their addresses, what's their identifying documents. Again, on number 5 here, I say a tip is the business itself can also have a FinCEN ID. Why would you want to do that? Well, sometimes some businesses own other businesses. You might have a situation like that. And even if it doesn't exist now, it might happen somewhere in the future. So I recommend just checking the box as you complete the business registration to say, hey, go ahead and give a FinCEN ID to my business as well. So I have that flexibility going forward. Last item here in this initial registration is you want to provide the profile information for those beneficial owners and the company applicant if applicable. So I'll go over what that means in just a moment. But just to show you what that looks like in practice, again, I'm back here on the beneficial ownership information website. It's just fincen.gov/BOI, not complicated. Down here, you'll see create a FinCEN ID. So that, again, if you as a business owner want to get an ID number, you'd go through that process. It's very quick. You get the ID number right away. And then the second step is, now that you've got that ID as an owner, to actually file a report using the BOI e-filing system. It's actually a pretty simple design website. You go in here, you need to file a BOI, and you go in and you can do it online. They have a PDF version of it as well, but I recommend just doing it electronically. It's pretty simple. So a couple key terms, and then I'm going to scroll through the form so you see what it looks like, but I just want to introduce a couple of vocabulary along this new world of beneficial ownership information reporting. The first one is, who is a reporting company? So it's a very helpful tool to use the Small Entity Compliance Guide that was released by the FinCEN. So to get to that, just to show you, I'm going to go back to the home page. Right here in the Small Business Resources, there's a little area. One of those things is the Small Entity Compliance Guide. It's actually very well written, fairly readable, definitely answers a lot of the common scenarios and questions that may come up. One of them is, hey, am I even required to report to begin with? And something I like to say is a lot of times small businesses are excluded from some of these new types of registrations, but ironically, this one is actually really targeted at small businesses because those are the ones that the federal government wasn't able to see who's behind them. So in many ways, you are the focus. So I have to imagine about 95, 97% of your typical small businesses are going to be affected with very little exception. Just to flip to that page, though, what is a reporting company? Zoom in here a little bit. It's effectively any company that was is formed under the law of their state. Like, did you file with your state to become an LLC, to become an LLP, to become a partnership, to become a corporation? If you went through efforts to sort of file the existence of a legal entity with the state, you're pretty much a reporting company. So some small businesses, they might just be sole proprietors that never went through the effort to sort of legally register a separate entity with the state. And if that's your case, then you're not a reporting company. You don't have to worry about the situation. Because again, remember, the point of the law was to try to see who was behind the title of certain companies. So if there is no separate company, there's nothing really to sort of have to disclose. But given that you do have a separate legal entity, almost certain this is going to affect you, you are a reporting company. Again, this document goes into some further detail if there's more question on your part. The other thing I'm going to point out in terms of reporting company is, do you happen to fall under one of the exemptions? There are exemptions. Again, it's going to be pretty narrowly defined. So it's important that you don't just see this and say, hey, I'm okay. So for instance, I'm an accounting firm. Just because I see accounting firm here doesn't mean I'm exempt. If I go and read the detail behind this, it says, hey, if I'm an accounting firm registered under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, Section 102, then I'm exempt, which is going to be larger accounting firms. Doesn't apply to me. We serve small businesses and their owners. So these are some of the exemptions. A couple common ones I think might be more frequently seen in the small business world. Nonprofits, tax exempt entities do have an exemption. So good chance if you're a nonprofit, unless you have an exception to the exception, you're probably going to be exempt. Also, things like credit unions, insurance companies, if your entity itself is licensed by the state. So there's a couple exceptions if you think one applies to you. So for instance, let's go down to number 19 here. I'm just going to scroll on down. There's just some helpful questionnaires. Let's go for the exemption 19 for tax exempt entities, saying, hey, do any of these following apply to you? You're organized as a 501c3, etc. So you can see it's pretty helpful little questionnaires that if you think the exemption applies to you, dig that one level further, see if it does. Otherwise, you need to go through the reporting process. So that's the reporting company, what that term means. The other term in here is beneficial owner. And so this can be a little misleading. We may just think off the bat, hey, it's whoever owns the company, but it actually doesn't technically mean that. And let me go in here and I'll take you to the page that talks about what the definition of beneficial owner is. And it's one of two things. So either one, an individual who exercises substantial control over a reporting company, or an individual who controls or owns at least 25% of the ownership interest. So again, many of your small businesses, they're one person, two person, maybe three person shops. Those ownership stakes are greater than 25%. It's a pretty cut and dry situation. Where you start to get a little dicey is if somebody maybe is, do they rise to the level of substantial control? And that's somebody who is making decisions over hiring and making decisions over strategy. That gets further defined down here. They're an important decision maker. They have any other type of form of control. And you, again, knowing the context of the law, you can sort of see what they're getting at. Sometimes somebody may not technically own shares in a company, but yet they still have an influence over what that company does. They have substantial control, and the government wants to know who those individuals are. So again, in most cases for small businesses, there won't be a lot of gray here. Just be aware that if you do have these types of situations, you might need to evaluate further. And again, that might be a situation to sort of get some additional professional counsel. So reporting company, beneficial owner. Third term I'm going to go over, that's a little bit of new lingo, is company applicant. And company applicant refers to the individual, if you are first filing a company with the state, Sometimes there may be somebody who fills out the forms at the state for you. So if you've already had a business for a number of years, it pre-existed January 1st of 2024, you don't have to worry about the company applicant. This is more for businesses that are registering January 1, 2024 or later. They also have to disclose who's the person who actually filed your papers with the state where you were formed. So again, it's more of a future-looking term that you might need to know if you're forming new businesses, but if you already had a business, you can sort of ignore the company applicant part of the information document. So again, those are sort of some of the key terms, what they mean, where you can go for more information. Here's a PDF version of what you're going to see on the website. You'll notice, hey, what type of filing am I doing? I'm doing an initial report. Here's my business's legal name, my tax ID, where I'm formed, the USA, for instance. Here is, if I have a DBA, I'm disclosing that. My tax identification type, it's an IRS number, for instance. Where was which state was I formed in? For instance, the state of Maryland, etc. What's my address? And then who are my, if in this case, here's that company applicant, it's not going to apply an initial registration. This will be grayed out, so you don't have to worry about it. If you had a business already before January 1, 2024, but if you're forming a new one, you would actually list the applicant's name. And then the last main section, who are the beneficial owners? So here's where you could drop in that FinCEN ID if you had one. If you didn't go through that step, you have to list out your name, your address, what form of identification you are using to supply. So whether it's a driver's license, whether it's a US passport, and then they're going to just ask you take a photo, attach it here, and basically hit upload. So that's really all there is to it. Again, it's not a complicated form. It's just new, and as long as you know a couple things, it makes a lot of sense. So a couple last bits of information to know, some deadlines. If your business existed at the end of 2023, you need to do an initial submission by December of 2024. So basically, they're giving you a year for all businesses that pre-existed to sort of get in there, get your information in there, trying to sort of give people some breathing room. If you open a new business in the 2024 calendar year, you have to file that first submission within 90 days of that business being created. So starting to tighten the window, sort of going forward. New businesses are going to have a 90-day window for 2024. Then starting 2025, next year, if you form a new business, that first registration, you've got 30 days to actually get that into the system. So really it needs to be, what used to be register with your state for a legal entity, register with the IRS to get a tax ID. There's now like a third step to say, go to this new FinCEN database and register the information there as well. So that's a good sort of habit to get into, a good thing to know in the back of your mind. The last line on here you'll see is any changes to information that was submitted previously, you have 30 days to let the federal government know. So what does that mean? It means if your business moves and you have a new business address, if your business registers a new DBA, a doing business as, new trade name, if you have a beneficial owner who moves, or a beneficial owner that has a new identifying document. So for instance, your driver's license gets reissued and information on it changes, like the license ID or your home address. Lastly, an example here is if you add or remove a beneficial owner, if you have somebody join the company and meets the criteria, or vice versa, somebody sells their interest in the business, all these types of changes and some other ones, anytime that happens, you need to go back to this database and update it so that the federal government has the latest information on who is exercising influence over the business's name. So this also is a little bit of a new thing to have in the back of your head anytime there's a business change that, to be sure to update the database. And 30 days is not a lot of time. It's probably less than other types of changes need to be submitted. So important to do that. All right, so some helpful resources. I sort of went over them a little bit as I went, but that small business compliance guide, very helpful. Check it out. If your situation requires a little bit more interpretation, there's a good chance you're going to find the answer you need right inside here. Again, that was available within the small business resources right here from the main website. There's that resources page I just pointed to, also has great information. And I'm also going to point out the BOI newsroom. They're keeping sort of their press releases live here right on the newsroom. The reason I mention is that increasingly a lot of scammers are taking advantage of any type of complication coming out of new government programs, having you submit potentially sensitive information. So you hear something that doesn't sound right, or somebody says, hey, there's been a big change. Instead of chasing down that rabbit hole, you can come right here, go to the BOI newsroom page and just say, hey, was there actually a legitimate change that I need to be aware of, or is somebody spreading misinformation? So I want to be sure to point out this as well. And as you can see, there's other things on this page, but those are some of the key resources that are helpful. So thank you for watching this. Hopefully this has been helpful to demystify a little bit about this new requirement, beneficial ownership information. Certainly keep your stick on the ice out there, and all our best to the entrepreneurs.